These last words of Jesus on the cross are not just phrases of pain or despair. Each one carries a mystical depth that can guide us to spiritual revelations and inner changes. To understand the importance of these words, it is essential to imagine the scene. Jesus, surrounded by the crowd, many unbelievers, others suffering for him, and there, in the solitude of his pain, he utters phrases that, at first glance, seem simple. But what is hidden behind each one of them? How can these words, spoken in a moment of total surrender, illuminate our own challenges and spiritual crises? This journey begins when we understand that these final words are precious teachings left by Jesus, as if they were instructions for the human spirit. The 7 words of Jesus on the cross were recorded in the Gospels, and each one seems to touch a different facet of human existence. They are words of forgiveness, of redemption, of abandonment, and at the same time, of profound peace and surrender. These words take us from a state of suffering to a path of spiritual elevation, and, as we explore their hidden meanings, we can connect more deeply with the essence of these teachings and, perhaps, transform ourselves. For centuries, scholars, mystics, and spiritual seekers have turned to these words as a source of inspiration, answers, and profound questioning. The final scene of Jesus on the cross is a powerful symbol of sacrifice and love. He knew that those were his last moments on earth, and yet each sentence carries emotional and spiritual weight. We might ask, what did he want us to understand with each of these statements? These words form a roadmap of spiritual elevation, going beyond physical death and life, pointing us towards a new perception of existence. Jesus' last teachings directly touch upon our own inner struggle and help us to look beyond human difficulties and dilemmas. The cross here transforms into a symbol of spiritual transformation. Imagine what it represents for us, as human beings, someone uttering these words in a moment of extreme pain. They are not just statements, they echo timeless wisdom. There is something universal in each of these words, as we all face moments of doubt, loss, and the search for redemption. Jesus, in speaking these words, may have created a code of wisdom and strength that could transcend generations, touching each person who hears and understands his messages. We can see this as a series of spiritual keys that open doors of understanding, offering us tools for our own journey. As we delve into the words of Jesus, we are invited to examine the very meaning of suffering, love, and faith. He did not attempt to avoid suffering. On the contrary, he fully surrendered himself, revealing something deeper than appearances. He showed us that suffering can be a gateway to something greater, a testament of faith and inner strength. And here arises an invitation. How can we, in our own challenges, use these words as guides for our personal transformation journey? This is the point where the spiritual mystery begins to unfold. The words of Jesus are, for many, a call to introspection, so that we may face our own challenges with greater wisdom and courage. As we reflect upon each of them, we discover that they are imbued with an almost mystical power, something that resonates with the human desire for transcendence. In a time of so much uncertainty and disconnection, these words offer a bridge to something greater, something that reminds us of the strength of the Spirit and the importance of surrender and unconditional love. Thus, what seemed like a tragic ending scene becomes, for us, a source of renewal. This quest for hidden meanings is what makes this message even more powerful. The mystical interpretation suggests that Jesus was teaching us about forgiveness, detachment, love, and surrender. Each of these virtues can be seen as a step that leads us to a higher understanding of ourselves and the universe. It's a path of transformation that we can tread by understanding the symbolism behind his words, and by doing so, we initiate a process of spiritual healing. It's as if Jesus was telling us that, Even at the most extreme point of pain, there is a path of peace and acceptance. In this context, the last words of Jesus encourage us to find meaning in our own struggles. Each challenge we face can be seen as a part of this spiritual journey, where we are constantly invited to forgive, love, and trust in something greater than ourselves. The mystery of his words is not just something to be intellectually understood, but to be experienced in our daily lives. Jesus invites us to reflect on the value of sacrifice and faith, and at the same time, to find comfort in the certainty that we are not alone in this journey. Thus, as we delve into these latest teachings, we are not just studying history, we are looking into a mirror that reflects our own human condition. The 7 words represent stages of our spiritual evolution, and with each revealed phrase, we can glimpse a valuable lesson. Perhaps the real message is that, in facing our own crosses, we are able to awaken a higher consciousness and discover our true essence. Jesus seems to tell us that every suffering, when understood and accepted, uplifts and purifies us. These words represent for many the mystery of the spiritual journey. They are not easy answers, but invitations for us to look into the unknown with courage and faith. It is at this point that spirituality meets transformation, and the message of Jesus on the cross becomes a powerful reminder that, even in our moments of greatest difficulty, there is a light. Thus, as we continue on this journey through the 7 words, we will see that each of them is not just a farewell, but a life instruction. With this, we prepare ourselves to explore the first of these words of Jesus on the cross. In his plea for forgiveness, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," we discover the beginning of this spiritual path, where forgiveness is not just a virtue, but a key that opens the heart to something greater. It is the first step for those who wish to follow the path of love and compassion, even amidst the deepest pains. When Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," he was not merely uttering words of mercy. He was establishing a path of profound understanding about the nature of forgiveness and spiritual ignorance. Let's imagine the scenario. Jesus was being unjustly condemned, humiliated, and suffering intense pain. However, his response to the violence he was experiencing was forgiveness, an act that many of us would struggle to conceive. By asking God to forgive his tormentors, Jesus showed that forgiveness is more than an isolated act. It is an attitude towards life, a way of viewing the world that transcends any personal offense. This forgiveness offered by Jesus goes beyond what we usually consider to be a compassionate response. He knew that ignorance is one of the greatest causes of human suffering. Many of his persecutors were blinded by fear, anger, or the very religious system that led them to believe he was a threat. By asking for forgiveness on their behalf, Jesus acknowledged this ignorance and revealed a compassion that surpasses judgments. He shows us that spiritual ignorance is the veil that separates people from the truth, and by forgiving, he also unveils this veil, freeing them from the weight of their actions. The phrase, "they know not what they do," reveals a deep understanding of human nature. Jesus recognizes that people's destructive behavior often arises from a lack of awareness and disconnection from the divine. Forgiveness, in this context, is not a concession or a way to ignore injustices, but an acceptance of human limitation, which can only be overcome through compassion and understanding. For him, forgiving was a way to rise above earthly illusions and see reality from a perspective of unity and unconditional love. On a spiritual level, Jesus' forgiveness becomes a key to liberation for all of us. By forgiving those who hurt him, he teaches us that true forgiveness is a liberation for both the one who forgives and the one who is forgiven. This act of surrender dissolves the chains of resentment and hatred, making room for a greater connection with the divine. When we forgive, we set aside the emotions that imprison us in a limited and negative view of the world. Thus, forgiveness becomes a gateway to healing and inner transformation. Jesus shows us that forgiveness is, above all, an act of personal freedom. It is not an approval of what is unjust, but a way to transcend the pains of the past and achieve a state of peace. When we stop carrying the weight of resentments, we begin to understand that these feelings only fuel our own suffering. By forgiving, Jesus shows that it is possible to live in a state of liberation, where we are no longer hostages of past grievances, and where we can experience true peace, which does not depend on external circumstances. This teaching about forgiveness becomes even more powerful when we consider the context of extreme suffering in which Jesus found himself. He doesn't forgive from a place of comfort or security, but at the height of his pain, which makes this attitude a testimony of his spiritual understanding. Amidst suffering, he reaches a state of transcendence where forgiveness is natural, a reflection of his connection with God and the true essence of love. This is a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not just for the easy moments. It should be practiced especially when we face the deepest pains. The wisdom of Jesus in forgiving also reveals an understanding of karma and the consequences of our actions. By forgiving his tormentors, he prevents their hateful actions from rebounding on them in a karmic way. In other words, he interrupts the cycle of pain and revenge, freeing his aggressors from the spiritual consequences of their actions, at least partially. This is an expression of the highest altruism, as he cares not only for his own peace, but for the spiritual evolution of those who mistreat him. This act of forgiving becomes a force that dissolves negative karma and opens a path to redemption. As we reflect on this teaching, we realize that Jesus invites us to adopt forgiveness as a path of transformation. In our daily lives, we often cling to resentments and judgments, which end up poisoning us from within. Jesus shows us that forgiveness is a way of liberation, where we can find peace amidst life's challenges. Forgiveness connects us to a larger reality, where we are able to see beyond appearances and approach a divine perspective. It is not a weakness, but an act of strength that frees us from emotional ties. This first word of Jesus is thus a call to compassion and detachment. When we forgive, we also free ourselves from the expectations we create regarding others and reconnect with the essence of life. Forgiving is, in a certain way, an act of faith in human goodness, even when everything seems to point to the contrary. The compassion that arises from forgiveness is not a passive acceptance, but an active force that transforms our reality and leads us to a deeper understanding of our spiritual purpose. Finally, this teaching about forgiveness is a bridge between our humanity and our spirituality. It challenges us to look at our wounds and find in them an opportunity for growth. Forgiveness is the first step for anyone who wishes to follow the path of peace, because when we forgive, we become vessels of light, capable of radiating love where there was once darkness. Jesus, with this simple phrase, gives us a key to true inner freedom. This first word on the cross, therefore, is an invitation for us to set aside our resentments and make forgiveness a cornerstone in our lives. By embracing this teaching, we open our hearts to a new reality, where we are no longer defined by our pains, but by our ability to love and understand. With forgiveness, we liberate not only others, but above all, ourselves. When Jesus addresses the thief at his side, saying, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise," he presents us with a teaching of redemption and faith in the transforming power of the present moment. This thief, who repents and recognizes the divinity of Jesus in the last moments of his life, becomes a symbol of the possibility of change, and of divine mercy that is not bound by the past. Jesus sees beyond the man's actions and perceives his sincerity, his search for a new chance, and offers him not just a promise, but a certainty. Paradise is something accessible, something he can achieve now. This sentence is a powerful reminder that forgiveness and redemption are available to all, regardless of what we have done in the past. For Jesus, the thief's past does not matter. What counts is his openness to repentance and his faith. This is a profound teaching about the nature of divine compassion, which does not demand perfection, but sincerity. It's as if he's saying that paradise is within reach of those who open themselves to love and truth, regardless of their mistakes. This is the transformative power of faith and the recognition of one's own imperfection. The word paradise here does not just mean a place, but a state of consciousness. Jesus teaches us that paradise is not something distant, but a reality that can be experienced here and now, when we are at peace with our actions and in communion with the divine. By saying that the thief will be with him in paradise, Jesus points to the possibility of transcending our human condition and connecting with the divine essence. This paradise is a state of liberation, a peace that arises from sincere repentance and acceptance of forgiveness. The redemption of this thief also reminds us that it's never too late for a spiritual change. No matter how lost we may feel, there's always a possibility of return. Jesus doesn't set conditions for access to paradise. He simply offers his companionship. This shows us that true redemption doesn't depend on rituals or material conditions, but on an inner openness, a sincere surrender to love and compassion. This is the mystery of transformative forgiveness, of healing love, and of welcoming, even in the last moments of a life. This phrase from Jesus also teaches us about the power of the now. By saying today, he emphasizes the importance of the present. It's not necessary to wait for a future life to find peace. Paradise can be accessed the moment we fully surrender to love and understanding. This challenges us to reflect on how we are living the present, and if we are truly open to transformation here and now. Jesus reminds us that paradise is a choice we make at every moment, a constant opportunity for renewal. For many mystics and spiritual seekers, the paradise that Jesus speaks of is not a distant place, but a state of being, a pure and loving presence that we can experience when we are in communion with the divine. The sincere repentance of the thief places him in a state of purity and acceptance, and Jesus, by affirming that he will be in paradise, reveals the simplicity of this path. All it takes is an open heart, a desire for change, and true faith. Great deeds are not necessary, just the humility to recognize our mistakes and the courage to seek forgiveness. Another profound aspect of this phrase is the promise of union with the divine. Jesus says that the thief will be with him, suggesting that true paradise is union with God and unconditional love. This promise of being with Jesus in paradise symbolizes overcoming the separation between the human and the divine. Jesus invites us to this union, to approach God not as something external, but as an intimate presence, a state of union where we are fully welcomed and loved. This teaching about paradise encourages us to find within ourselves the path to peace and freedom. It reminds us that judgment does not belong to us, but to God, and that often we are harder on ourselves than the divine itself. By looking at the thief next to him with mercy, Jesus invites us to abandon our judgments and to embrace the good in each of us. This is an invitation to acceptance, to overcoming guilt, and to seek a direct connection with the divine. For those in search of spiritual understanding, this promise from Jesus is a comfort, as it shows us that the spiritual journey is not a straight line, but a series of moments where we have the opportunity to choose the path of love. Even when we feel lost, there is always a chance of return, and paradise, far from being a distant place, is a living and accessible presence. Jesus teaches us that each one of us is worthy of love, and that divine forgiveness is always available for those who seek it sincerely. As we reflect on this second word of Jesus, we are invited to seek paradise in our own lives. Each act of kindness, compassion, and sincere repentance is a step in this direction. And by understanding that paradise is an inner state, we can start to live in harmony, cultivating peace and love in our hearts. Jesus' teaching reminds us that the divine is always by our side, ready to guide and welcome us, and that the spiritual journey is, ultimately, a journey back to our true essence. With this message of hope and redemption, Jesus transforms the moment of death into a gateway to eternal life. By inviting the thief into paradise, he reveals that the essence of divine love is acceptance and unconditional welcome. This promise challenges us to look beyond appearances and see the potential for redemption in everyone around us, including ourselves. Paradise, then, ceases to be a place of arrival and becomes an experience of presence and communion with the sacred. At the moment of crucifixion, Jesus turns to his mother, Mary, and to the disciple John, who is by his side, and pronounces the phrase, "Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother." At first glance, these words may seem merely an expression of concern for his mother's future, but spiritually, they carry a much deeper meaning. This statement reflects a vision of unity, where Jesus, in his final moment, establishes a spiritual bond that transcends blood ties, revealing a universal vision of compassion and mutual care. This act of Jesus points to the idea of a universal family, where we are all responsible for each other. By saying, "Woman, behold your son," he redefines the roles of motherhood and filiation, inviting us to look beyond traditional bonds and embrace a broader understanding of human connection. In this context, Mary becomes a symbol of universal compassion, and John represents all of us, humanity seeking a point of connection with the divine and the maternal love that welcomes, protects, and nurtures. The symbolism of this sentence is profound. Mary, as a mother, represents the divine feminine principle, unconditional love and compassion, while John, the faithful disciple, represents humanity in search of understanding and spiritual growth. By uniting these two, Jesus suggests that we are all part of a large spiritual family, connected by bonds of love and support. This act reminds us that spirituality is not a solitary path, but a journey where we are constantly called to support and care for each other. For mystics, this phrase from Jesus symbolizes the balance between masculine and feminine energies within each of us. The son and the mother represent complementary aspects of our own nature, where the rational and intuitive sides meet. Jesus, by uniting John and Mary, invites us to cultivate this internal integration, to find harmony between reason and compassion, between strength and tenderness. Thus, this union symbolizes the ideal of a balanced life, where we are at peace with our various facets. This statement also reminds us of the importance of love and care in human relationships. Jesus, in establishing this new connection between Mary and John, points to the idea that true love is one that transcends possessiveness and expands beyond blood ties. It is a love that welcomes, cares for, and respects. In a world often divided by barriers and prejudices, this message of unity and empathy reminds us that, in essence, we are all one family and have the responsibility to care for each other. In saying, "Woman, behold your son," Jesus is also saying goodbye to his mother, knowing that she, like any mother, would suffer at seeing her son depart. He comforts her by designating John as her son, ensuring her protection and support after his departure. This gesture of Jesus is an example of selfless love, for even in his moment of greatest pain, he concerns himself with alleviating Mary's suffering and ensuring that she will be cared for. This is love in its purest and most selfless form, placing the well-being of another above any personal pain. Furthermore, this sentence leads us to reflect on the concept of belonging. We all have the need to feel part of something bigger, to be welcomed, loved, and understood. By uniting John and Mary, Jesus reminds us that spirituality is not just an individual pursuit, but a shared experience. Each one of us is called to be a mother and son to others, to care and protect, to offer support, and to be supported. This is the teaching of a living spirituality, where compassion and love are expressed in practice. However, Jesus does not choose just anyone for this role. He chooses John, the beloved disciple, the one who stayed by his side until the end. This teaches us that true spiritual connection is born from fidelity, presence, and commitment to the path. John symbolizes the faithful seeker, the one who stays close, who seeks understanding, and who is willing to share this responsibility with others. Thus, Jesus shows us that to achieve true spiritual union, we need to be there for others, just as John was there for him. The relationship between Mary and John can also be seen as a metaphor for caring for the world. Just as Mary welcomes John as her son, we are called to care for each other, and more broadly, our planet. Jesus, by uniting these two, reminds us that we are all guardians of love, compassion, and responsibility for one another. This is a message of unity and respect for life in all its forms, inspiring us to live in harmony with the world around us. This phrase from Jesus is, in essence, a call to service to others. He invites us to look around and recognize that, just as John was given to Mary, there are people in our lives who need our care and attention. This is the call of spiritual love, which invites us to be the mother to those who need comfort and to be the son to those who inspire us with their wisdom. Each of us has the potential to play these roles at different times, contributing to a more compassionate and loving world. Finally, this third word of Jesus is a reminder that, deep down, we are all one family. It shows us that when we see others as part of ourselves, we are approaching true compassion and real love. By uniting John and Mary, he invites us to abandon divisions and see ourselves as a single humanity, connected by bonds of love and mutual responsibility. This is the ideal of a full spiritual life, where each act of love and care becomes an expression of the divine. When Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Logically, he expresses one of the most poignant statements of his final moments. These words seem to contrast with his faith and connection with the divine, leading us to reflect on their true meaning. Many scholars believe that he was reciting Psalm 22, which begins with this cry of despair, but through its verses, transforms into a song of trust and hope. Jesus, by expressing this sentiment, allows himself to feel the anguish and loneliness, showing us that the experience of emptiness is part of the spiritual journey. This cry of abandonment resonates within us all. On our journey, we inevitably go through moments where the divine presence seems distant, when the suffering is so profound that we feel disconnected. Jesus, in giving voice to this pain, recognizes the humanity in all of us and teaches us that the feeling of abandonment is not a sign of spiritual weakness, but a natural stage in our evolution. By experiencing this loneliness, he shows us that even the highest of beings can go through a period of darkness, and that this does not diminish their faith or connection with the divine. This phrase from Jesus also reminds us that the spiritual path is not made up only of moments of light, but also of shadows. He teaches us that suffering is part of the purification process, which helps us to free ourselves from the ego and leads us to a complete surrender. Jesus, by crying out to God, reveals his vulnerability, an aspect of his human nature that is often ignored. This is a powerful teaching about the acceptance of our own vulnerability, as it is precisely in our moments of weakness that spiritual strength can emerge. The feeling of abandonment that Jesus expresses is also an invitation to surrender. He knew that the divine plan was beyond his human understanding at that time, yet he chose to trust. This cry represents the struggle between doubt and faith, where the soul, even without clear answers, surrenders to the unknown. Jesus shows us that trust in the divine does not mean the absence of doubts, but the ability to surrender to something greater, even when all seems lost. This is the essence of faith, to move forward, even when the path seems dark. For mystics, the cry of Jesus is an expression of the concept of the dark night of the soul, a term popularized by St. John of the Cross to describe the moment of deep spiritual crisis when the presence of God seems absent. During this dark night, the soul is purified through suffering, so it can reach a deeper understanding of the divine. Jesus, by experiencing this abandonment, shows us that this experience is part of the journey of every spiritual seeker, and that after the darkness, a greater light always emerges. This moment of apparent helplessness also reflects the human aspect of Jesus, who finds himself at a point where physical and emotional pain become overwhelming. He does not hide his agony, but expresses it openly, showing us that spirituality is not an escape from suffering, but an acceptance of life in all its facets. By sharing his pain, Jesus reminds us that we are not alone in our own moments of despair, and that, even in our greatest loneliness, there is a path of redemption and transformation. Jesus' cry also carries a message of hope. By quoting Psalm 22, he invites us to read beyond the first words and to realize that, in the end, the psalmist declares his trust in divine intervention. Jesus, in uttering this phrase, teaches us that suffering is not the end, but part of a process that leads to redemption. Thus, he invites us to view suffering as a gateway to spiritual growth, a path that, as painful as it may be, leads to a deeper understanding of the divine essence itself. This expression of helplessness is a call for reflection on the nature of the divine and the human. Jesus, upon feeling this disconnection, shows us that true faith involves the acceptance of mystery and the courage to live without answers. He reminds us that the divine may seem distant at times, but in reality, it is never absent. The abandonment he experiences is an illusion of the human condition, and by transcending this illusion, he shows us that unity with God is eternal, even though sometimes invisible. In crying out to God, Jesus also reveals the depth of his surrender. Even amidst pain, he chooses to turn to the Father, showing us that in our own moments of suffering, we should seek this same connection. He teaches us that, even when we don't feel God's presence, we can turn to him, for it is in the midst of darkness that divine light becomes most necessary. This is a lesson of persistence and faith, inspiring us to carry on, even when everything seems meaningless. In the midst of darkness, that divine light becomes most necessary. This is a lesson of persistence and faith, inspiring us to carry on, even when everything seems meaningless. This sentence challenges us to reflect on the meaning of pain in our lives. Jesus, when facing pain head-on, does not try to escape from it, but embraces it and transforms it into an act of love and redemption. He shows us that suffering, no matter how difficult, can be a path to overcoming and discovering what is most true within us. By experiencing his own dark night, he shows us that pain is not the end, but a starting point for renewal and union with the divine. Finally, This word of Jesus is a reminder that, even in our moments of greatest despair, there is a force that sustains us, even if we cannot perceive it. Jesus, when crying out to God, reveals the depth of his love and trust, even amidst the most intense pain. He teaches us that, by expressing our pain, we are not distancing ourselves from the divine, but drawing closer to it. For it is through this surrender that we find the peace and comfort we so desperately seek. When Jesus says, "I thirst," while on the cross, this statement resonates far beyond the physical need. In the mystical and spiritual context, this phrase represents a deep longing, a desire for connection with something greater, and at the same time, an expression of his commitment to humanity. In his physical thirst, Jesus expresses the spiritual thirst that permeates all human beings, the thirst for completeness, for connection with the divine, and for meaning amidst suffering. This desire to quench symbolizes our search for something that transcends the mundane, the relentless desire to find enduring peace and a higher truth. Jesus' thirst is also a reminder of his humanity, revealing that he shares with us the pains and needs of the body. He who is seen as the embodiment of love and compassion feels the same discomfort and vulnerability as we do. This recognition of his human fragility brings us closer to his experience and reminds us that pain, both physical and spiritual, is part of the earthly journey. Thus, Jesus teaches us that accepting our own vulnerability is part of the path to transcendence and to true inner peace. In the spiritual context, "I am thirsty" symbolizes the longing for a complete communion with God, a desire to return to the divine source. By expressing his thirst, Jesus is turning towards the Father, yearning for this full union that only divine love can offer. This moment represents the stage of the spiritual journey, where we seek something beyond ourselves, where we long to fill the void that we feel in our hearts. It is a call to surrender, to seek the divine as the only source capable of quenching our spiritual thirst. This desire of Jesus for something beyond physical satisfaction also leads us to reflect on our own yearnings. How often do we seek to fill the inner void with fleeting things, believing that the material world can quench our thirst for meaning? Jesus shows us that true satisfaction cannot be found in anything external. It is a fulfillment that arises from the connection with the most sacred within us. This is the invitation to introspection and the recognition that often our search for happiness and completeness is, in fact, a search for the divine. For mystics, this thirst represents Jesus' burning love for humanity. He desires not only to fulfill his mission, but also to establish a bond with each one of us, offering himself completely in an act of unconditional love. His thirst is a symbol of his desire to unite with everyone, to touch our hearts and guide us on the path of truth and compassion. It is a thirst for souls, a call for everyone to recognize the transformative power of divine love and find in it true satisfaction. The phrase "I am thirsty" is also an expression of empathy. Jesus, by uttering these words, identifies with all those who, at some point, felt this same spiritual thirst. He shares the human anguish and quest, presenting himself as an example that, even in moments of pain and despair, we can turn to the divine for comfort. This is the gesture of a spiritual master who understands our needs and, with compassion, shows us that there is a path to redemption and peace, even amidst adversity. This teaching about spiritual thirst invites us to reflect on our own motivations and to seek what truly fulfills us. In a world where we are constantly encouraged to pursue external achievements, Jesus reminds us that true satisfaction is an inward experience. He invites us to question where we are placing our energy and attention, and to turn towards the pursuit of something deeper, something that truly nourishes our soul and offers us the peace we so desperately seek. Jesus, in expressing his thirst, also reveals the depth of his surrender. He allows himself to fully feel the discomfort and pain, without trying to avoid them. This is a powerful example for all of us, as it teaches us that spirituality is not a denial of human experience, but a profound acceptance of everything we are. By acknowledging his own thirst, he shows us that accepting our needs and limitations is an essential part of the path to self-knowledge and healing. This phrase from Jesus reminds us also that we are all interdependent and that our spiritual growth is nourished by love and compassion. By expressing his thirst, Jesus is asking not only for water, but for a response of love and care. He invites us to realize that our spirituality is manifested not only in moments of prayer or silence, but in the way we take care of each other. The thirst he feels is an invitation for us to also quench the thirst of those around us, offering our presence and our support. Finally, "I am thirsty" is a call to humility. Jesus, who could have remained silent or demonstrated his power, chooses to express his vulnerability. He reminds us that, no matter how vast our knowledge or spiritual achievements, there will always be something we cannot control, something that invites us to surrender to the mystery of life. By saying, "I am thirsty," he shows us that true strength lies in acknowledging our needs and in seeking what can truly fulfill us. With this statement, Jesus invites us to recognize our own spiritual thirst and to turn towards the divine source. He reminds us that, no matter how much we seek satisfaction in other things, nothing can fill this void except the love and peace that come from communion with the sacred. By welcoming our inner thirst and directing ourselves towards the divine, we find the path to a full life, where true peace and happiness reside. When Jesus says it is finished, he is not just declaring the end of his physical suffering, but affirming the fulfillment of his spiritual mission. This phrase symbolizes the conclusion of a divine purpose and represents the peace of one who has completed what they came into the world to do. This is a moment of total accomplishment, where Jesus, with serenity, confirms that everything that needed to be done was done. His mission, filled with love, compassion, and sacrifice, was fulfilled. It is a teaching about the power of living with purpose and about the liberation that comes from knowing we have done everything within our reach. This "it is finished" goes beyond a simple end. It's the accomplishment of something greater. Jesus, in uttering these words, demonstrates that he accepted and fulfilled his destiny, not with resistance, but with full acceptance. He shows us that there is a deep peace in accepting our role in the world, in recognizing when a phase is complete, and in letting go of what we can no longer control. This act of final surrender is an example of detachment and trust, as he hands over his work and his life into the hands of the divine, with the certainty that everything happened according to the higher plan. For spiritual seekers, this phrase from Jesus represents the cycle of life and death, of beginning and end. Each phase of our journey has a purpose, and when we fulfill it with love and dedication, we reach the "it is finished" with a sense of duty fulfilled. Jesus teaches us that true fulfillment is not measured by external success, but by the depth of our dedication to our mission. By understanding that everything has a purpose, we can find peace and freedom, even in the face of death or closure. This final moment of Jesus is an expression of redemption. "It is finished" is the statement that his death on the cross represents a renewal for all of humanity, an opportunity for spiritual rebirth. He fulfilled his part, and with that, offers us the possibility to transform our own lives. It's a reminder that our actions, when done with intention and love, have the power to influence the world in ways that often go beyond our understanding. By completing his mission, he opens the doors for each of us to discover and fulfill our own purpose. Jesus' acceptance of his fate is also an example of humility. He who performed miracles, who brought transformative teachings, did not seek to escape suffering. Instead, he fully accepted what fate had in store for him. This "it is finished" is an act of humility, an acknowledgement that everything follows a cycle, and that there is a greater purpose in each phase of existence. He teaches us that, by fulfilling our role with humility and detachment, we are in tune with the flow of life and with the divine will. In each phase of existence, he teaches us that, by fulfilling our role with humility and detachment, we are in tune with the flow of life and with the divine will. This phrase is, moreover, a teaching about the importance of honoring the commitments we have made. Jesus knew the weight of his mission, and even in the face of extreme suffering, chose to see everything through to the end. He did not abandon his journey or avoid the sacrifice. Instead, he fully surrendered himself, doing what was necessary. This "it is finished" inspires us to honor our own commitments, to move forward with courage, and to finish what we have started. It is an example of integrity and faithfulness to purpose, something we can all strive for in our lives. "It is finished" is also an expression of freedom. By completing his mission, Jesus frees himself from the earthly cycle and returns to the divine presence. He shows that by fulfilling our purpose, we find a freedom that goes beyond physical and material limitations. This is the type of freedom born from a life lived in alignment with our values and what truly matters. Jesus teaches us that true freedom arises when we are no longer bound to what does not serve our purpose, when we live with authenticity and wholeness. This moment is a turning point. For Jesus, the "it is finished" marks the end of his physical journey and the beginning of a new phase, a life that transcends form and connects with the divine. In a broader sense, it reminds us that, just like him, we all go through stages and cycles that have a beginning, middle, and end. By accepting these cycles and allowing ourselves to close chapters, we make room for the new. This is a powerful teaching about the importance of letting go, trusting the process, and opening ourselves up to what is to come. Jesus, "it is finished," is also a lesson about inner peace. It shows us that true peace is not about avoiding suffering, but about accepting the purpose given to us and fulfilling it with love and dignity. By completing his mission, he achieves a state of serenity, a peace that comes from a deep understanding that he did what he was supposed to do. This is the kind of peace we all can strive for, a peace that comes from the certainty that we are on the right path and that we are giving our best. Finally, this statement by Jesus is a reminder that each of us has a unique mission to fulfill. He inspires us to seek our own purpose, to live with intention, and to find meaning in what we do. By saying "it is finished," he challenges us to reflect on what we are accomplishing in our lives, if we are truly living in alignment with our values and purpose. It is an invitation for us, at the end of our own journeys, to also look back and say that it was all worth it, that our life was fully lived. With "it is finished," Jesus leaves us a legacy of love, faith, and dedication to purpose. He shows us that by fulfilling our mission, we transcend fear and pain, reaching a state of peace that goes beyond words. This is the pinnacle of his journey, and at the same time, a new beginning for all who are inspired by his example. He reminds us that, regardless of the difficulties, it is worth moving forward, with courage, with faith, and with an open heart. When Jesus utters the phrase, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," he presents us with the final act of his earthly life, total surrender. These words reflect absolute trust in the divine and symbolize complete submission. By offering his spirit to God, Jesus teaches us that, regardless of the circumstances, we can always trust in the greater plan. It is an act of faith that transcends human understanding, an affirmation that our true essence is in the hands of the Creator, and that at the end of our journey, we all return to the source. This surrender of Jesus is not a forced submission, but a voluntary and conscious surrender. He chooses to give up his spirit, showing that surrender is not weakness, but an act of strength and faith. By fully trusting in God, he teaches us about the importance of letting go of control and trusting in something greater than ourselves. This is the pinnacle of spiritual trust, where there is no fear, only peace and certainty that we are safe, regardless of the circumstances. For mystics, this phrase symbolizes the return to a state of unity with the divine. Jesus, in surrendering his spirit, transcends the physical world and reunites with the Creator. This is the moment when the duality between the human and the divine disappears, and he becomes pure spirit. It's a reminder that we all have an essence that goes beyond the body and mind, an eternal soul that, at the end of its journey, returns to its original state, in communion with the divine. This last word of Jesus also teaches us about the acceptance of death as a part of life. Instead of resisting, he welcomes the passage, demonstrating that death is not the end, but a transition. By saying, "Into your hands I commit my spirit," he shows us that, by trusting in God, we can face death with serenity and hope. It's a profound lesson about the immortality of the soul and the fact that our essence is eternal, a flame that never goes out, but returns to its source. The surrender of Jesus also represents the culmination of his mission of love and compassion. He fulfilled everything that needed to be done, and now, in his final act, he completely surrenders to the divine will. This is a powerful example of detachment, where he, even in the height of pain, releases all resistance and surrenders with love. He teaches us that true detachment is not a denial of life, but a profound acceptance that everything has its time, and that in the end, everything returns to the divine. This sentence also invites us to reflect on the meaning of surrender in our own lives. Often, we resist the natural flow of things, fighting against changes and inevitable endings. Jesus shows us that there is a profound peace in surrender, a liberation that is born when we set aside our ego and personal desires and trust in the path that life has in store for us. This is a lesson about the importance of flowing, of accepting what is, and of allowing ourselves to live in harmony with the universe. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit, also symbolizes the conclusion of a cycle and the beginning of something new. For Jesus, this moment is not the end, but the transition to a new form of existence. He reminds us that, just like him, we all go through cycles and transitions that lead us to new experiences and dimensions. It is a message of hope and renewal, inspiring us to see each ending as an opportunity for a new beginning. In uttering these words, Jesus also teaches us about the importance of trusting in something greater than ourselves. Often in times of crisis, we try to control what is beyond our reach, creating more suffering. Jesus shows us that true peace comes from accepting that there are forces beyond our understanding, and that in the end, our essence belongs to something much larger. This is a call to faith, trust, and the surrender of our worries into the hands of the divine. This last sentence of Jesus is also an expression of love. By surrendering to the Father, he reaffirms his deep connection with God and shows us that, in the end, love is what leads us back home. This surrender is a demonstration of the unconditional love that exists between the Creator and his creation, a relationship that transcends time and space. Jesus, in surrendering, teaches us that love is the force that guides us, that sustains us, and that, at the end of everything, is what really matters. Finally, by saying, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," Jesus invites us to a life of trust and surrender. He reminds us that, no matter how many challenges and moments of pain we face, we can always find comfort and peace by surrendering to the divine. This is true spiritual freedom, where we are able to set aside our fears and trust that we are being guided and protected. This surrender is the pinnacle of the spiritual journey, where we achieve union with the divine and become part of the eternal essence. With this final word, Jesus concludes his earthly mission, leaving us a legacy of love, faith, and trust. He inspires us to live courageously, to accept what we cannot change, and to trust in the purpose of our lives. By surrendering his spirit, he teaches us that, in the end, we all return to the same place from where we came, to the divine source. It is an act of love and faith that reminds us that, regardless of the difficulties, we are always in the hands of something greater. Mind Unfettered. This journey through the last words of Jesus reveals profound messages of compassion, surrender, and transformation. And now I want to hear from you. Which of these words touched you the most? Was there a moment when you felt this spiritual thirst or this surrender that Jesus demonstrated? Share in the comments your experience or your insight on what we discussed here. By manifesting our thoughts together, we strengthen this community and pave the way for an even more powerful spiritual journey. And if you were intrigued by these hidden messages, the next video will delve even deeper. In the hidden science of Jesus, how spiritual physics unveils the secrets of consciousness, we dive into the connections between science and spirituality, unraveling how spiritual physics can help us understand consciousness and our own existence. Click on the screen to continue and delve deeper into this next level of wisdom. Let's discover the mystery of the universe together.